Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on the Beaming Hoteliers podcast. And today we are talking about microservices implementation stories. And today I had a guest, Brad McCoy from New Zealand. He's currently living in Australia right now. And tell us about Brad. First, introduce yourself to the audience who are listening to us today on the podcast, and tell us where you're currently busy at these days.
Sure. So my name's Brad. I'm, as I've said, from New Zealand. I'm currently working in Australia at the moment in Queensland. So, um, working, I recently moved back to software engineering. So before I was the head of platform engineering, doing a lot of cloud and DevOps, and then I decided, it was getting a little bit boring for me to, do YAML files all day, and I felt like I sort of mastered, you know, most of it. So I decided to go back into software engineering to then apply that knowledge to make the apps, work in the cloud and not the other way around. So other companies that I work for, they would build the code and then they would just say, okay, here's the code. Can you put it somewhere? Whereas now I'm going to try and take a step back and try and build those apps to be working in, cloud native architecture. So, yeah, working a lot within Kubernetes and CNCF, CDF projects. Also contributing or some on Ortelius, what we'll probably talk a little bit about today as well. And yeah, that's a brief introduction.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Brad is a wonderful guy. He's helping us a lot in the hoteliers community, and he helping us connect with the highly skilled individuals from the industry. And we're really, really looking forward to his contribution. So tell us about, as we're talking about today, the microservices and one of the tool that we are developing on the hotelier side is kind of getting people life more easier who are migrating to the microservices architecture, because it's really a painstaking. It looks very attractive in a theory, but when you implement a microservices based architecture, it's really a painstaking task. There are so many, like, you have a one box previously where everything is reside in that box, and when you want to distribute those application in a separate languages or the separate deployment matter, it's look really a difficult model to implement that. So tell us about first the or your own story of migrate, how you start your microservices story, and what are the some of the pain points you have been facing for the last few years.
Yeah, sure. So being working in maybe 3 or 4 companies over the last 5 years, it's a lot of the tasks, the problems that you face are more political problems. So, you have, if it's a bigger company, it's even worse. So, a bigger company like really struggles to actually implement it properly because you have your enterprise architects that high level they draw these boxes where in theory that's great, but then you have another business stakeholder saying you have 3 months to do this. So it it's very tough, like, to do the actual planning of it as well, because if you have time to market where your product, you want your product in the hands of customers straight away, and not disrupting sales, marketing, all the other side of the business. So technically, it's probably pretty straightforward, but all these other factors coming into it as well is really difficult. So things like traditionally, a monolith would have, like, let's say one data store, maybe one database, for example, and now that if you have like 10 microservices, it said that in a true microservices architecture, they should have their own data store. So things like reporting become harder as well, because from when you used to run your reports for accounting or sales or customer success managers, you, instead of just querying one database and maybe uploading it to a data warehouse or data lake, you then have to then extrapolate the data from 10 different data stores, which that's one more milder challenge. But um, then you have like discussions around how should this microservice talk to each other? How should it expose itself? And you can really go around in circles as well. So I think the biggest pain point that I've seen is that businesses don't really truly understand what they are and how they work in the business because they can always work a little bit different. So that's some of the challenges that I've seen. I mean, the technical stuff is a little bit easier, but it's agreeing with all the business as well. That's the hard part. So you have to agree with engineering. They have to understand why you do it. You have to agree with the cloud team, the architecture team. When it's a startup, it does become a lot easier. So yeah, that's just some of them that I can think of straight away. But it is, yeah, even like team topologies as well. So traditionally, you might just have one big team, and then generally I've seen team topologies changing where you might have like a domain driven design as well to run these microservices, and then I've seen big problems there as well because in domain-driven design, no one really knows the full architecture, so they might work on one small service of a microservice, of the code, and then no one really knows like the overall big picture because they're just focusing on that, and the teams are driven away from the bigger picture. Um, Cost as well. So I seen SQL Server being used. So they wanted to pull SQL Server database and they wanted to do microservice architecture. So they then had they had 10 SQL Server, which cost a lot of money. And these are for small things as well. So they could have used Mongo or something like that. But the old mindset of being in SQL Server sort of so old mindsets is you shouldn't really carry that to the microservice world as well. So they and remember like when you have 10 databases, if you have 4 environments, that's generally times 4. Let's just say traditional dev, test, staging, UAT, or prod, around 4. So then this company ended up with 71 databases, and if it's SQL Server, it costs thousands and thousands of dollars. So I guess a lot of it is like mindset of people and attitude and willing to step into this new world as well, because it's not just as simple as writing, you know, breaking your code down. You've got to think about, how can this code talk back to the other microservice or function? How can we not make development time slow down and lead time? All those metrics that we look at as business of how we're performing, and even I've seen like tech debt being made with new services as well. So yeah, in general, the biggest challenges I've seen are actually with people. How about you? Have you
Yes,
seen any?
absolutely.
Have you seen any challenges
Yes,
like that as
absolutely.
well? Mm,
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think like I we started the conversation like we know there are some limitation to the traditional model, and you need to know like the microservice give you a lot of the flexibility. Like if I'm using the .NET language and some of the people are using the Ruby languages, having a previous model doesn't give me that kind of flexibility to have two different languages and a
mm,
same box with everything written inside it. But now we distribute these responsibilities with the different teams. So I can write my microservices in .NET, and somebody else might write their microservices in Go language, and somebody else is writing their language in the Ruby on Rails. That's good. That's really good model that everybody like about it. But as you draw some of the conversation, like how you can orchestrate these microservices at the runtime, how they behave and how they interact with it, that's really a challenging. How the communication between these microservices is another challenge, and what are the patterns available for us as a technologist in this era of time to having a microservices communication rather simpler or not making as complex. So I think this is the communication challenges, and also there's a bridge of gap because when you talk to the you develop something, you are in isolation. You think there are things
Mm.
moving in a very good direction, but you need to coordinate your decision to the another team as well. So I've seen these kind of the isolation in my current setup, and and we are working out for ways to kind of have a more communication, more communication channel within the team, so they can have leverage more these kind of setup. And also tell us about like what are the deployment pattern you see often in the industry right now. Previously we have dev staging, and that is for the whole projects. But when you develop some your own microservices, what do you think, what are the best way to test these microservices? Either you create as every microservice has their own dev staging or production, or either you have what are the other deployment strategies available, because that's really look complex in theory. Every microservices has dev staging and production, because you need to have a cost associated with it for every deployment model. What do you see where the industry is going, and what are the different deployment strategies today exist in the microservices implementation?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's no real way around the cost. If you do have all these environments, I've been working with a lot of offshore teams lately as well, and I've seen a lot of the developers are not really testing these things on their local computer anymore as well, which is quite shocking for me. I mean, how can you, as a developer, how can you test that your code actually works if you don't have the UI and the API on your computer? I'm seeing a lot of them saying they've written the code and then they throw it over the fence of testing. So I'm seeing a lot of test environments coming up as well, which I don't really think you need as much as they do. But yeah, I can see, and these are just the companies that I'm working at the moment, right? So this is not a representation um, of the whole world, but just what I've seen recently is that there's been a lot of people aren't really shifting left on on the testing. So they're starting to do that with the DevSecOps and the security, but they're not really doing test-driven development and having the unit tests in the pipeline and really using the pipeline to do the testing. So I've seen a lot of, like you said, the environments, a lot of test environments being made. I think Sasha's company has like 30 QA environments or something, which is, that's a lot. That's quite crazy. Um, for Atelius, for example, we had the discussion as well. As like, do you do mono repo or poly repo? So are you going to have all of your code for that up in one code, or are you going to have it in many? And these are debates that people have as well. Like this way is better, this way is better. But for Atelius, we have a charts repo as well. So we use the Helm releaser. So what that is it's a GitHub action that will it leverages GitHub pages, and then that will index the Helm chart that is on the poly repo, and then it will update the Helm chart repo. So then you have in Artifact Hub, you have a really nice catalog of Helm charts that you can use for Atelier. So that I feel like that really helps the environments to sort of bring that back into the dev's computer as well, which I like to see. Just having the ability for them to run that on their Kubernetes cluster. Like there's so many great lightweight distributions like K3s, Kind. There's probably 10 or 15 of them. But yeah, I think one key thing is to just really standardize on what you're doing, for all these teams, and come up with your Helm charts, and for strategies deployment we use GitOps as well. So that's its own little, it's its own big challenges as well. Once you start to go into there, then you have secrets, and but we're using GitOps as well to look at these charts and then deploy them to our clusters as well to different environments. So yeah, it's you could talk about it all day, I guess. How about you for deployment?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's really a challenging and it's a research oriented topic at this moment of time. Like, what is your team is capable of? You need to understand how, like, if you have a DevOps team, that's perfectly fine to build out some pipeline in it. But if you're a new startup and you don't have a DevOps team, then you need to think about it to have either every microservice have dev staging and production. And that's quite a complex in order to manage it, in order to have more, because if you set something up, that's mean you have to bring the system back up when something goes down, and you have to manage it 24 by 7. It's not just building up, it's just how resilient you
Mm.
are, how much you time to have for these setup environment. And it's also tell us about, because when you have some microservices deployment or exist in the architecture, you need to have some kind of dashboard where you see how my microservices are actually behaving. It's some of the microservices that goes down, some of that goes up. What is current factor? Is it pending state? Is it crashed down? Is it started? What is braving? And you tell us, do you have some solution available today on these kind of dashboard? Then they can tell us the 24 hours 7 statistics of our microservices like deployment model.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I guess a lot of the stuff we're talking about as well. There's a big gap in the IT market for DevOps engineers too. So it's actually really difficult to get a good one at the moment, and you have to pay so much money. So we're seeing a lot of companies. Like one example would be VMware. They're understanding that Kubernetes is probably just the underlying platform, but they're trying to put things on top to make all that stuff easier. So I'm starting to see a lot of products come up that handle this stuff as well. Um, so you can use in terms of observability. If we're talking free and open source, we can use Prometheus, Grafana, Loki, um, and then what we're doing with Ortelius as well is that so Ortelius will catalog the microservices so we can see the sprawl, because that maybe we'll talk about that after. That's a whole separate problem. But if we look at how we're deploying with Ortelius, then we're using Captain. So we have Argo CD, and then that's going to pick up the change, and then Captain will come along, and then it will have the quality gates. So we're going to use the quality gates to make sure, with our Prometheus metrics, and the so we're doing progressive delivery. So we're starting off, in test UAT prod, and the quality gate will say yes, this is right. You can now move to the next environment, and then you can have manual gates to production as well if you want to do some sort of functional or end-to-end testing from the testing team. So yeah, we're doing all that open source, which is quite cool. In terms of what you said about services down, with Captain, you can use remediation as well. So one really cool podcast I seen recently was with Crossplane and Captain, and they were talking about, let's say you have your, as you know, Crossplane is infrastructure as code. It's like more of a cloud native, born in cloud native world. You can use GitOps as well. So they were talking about using Crossplane for infrastructure in AWS, and if if you hook up like Prometheus or Dynatrace to Captain, it can say, okay, I'm sending in a problem event, and then the event will say, okay, AWS is down. Then you have a remediation sequence that will say, okay, this is telling me it's down. Let's go spin up our stuff onto Azure. So using Crossplane, you can use the same thing. So your auto remediation can that's another expensive sort of model, but I guess you can have cold standby. If you have some like really good code and it's fully automated, then you don't need to have active really, unless you're like a payments or bank or generally you can be down for 5 minutes, and then you can remediate all your services onto the other cloud, which is that was a really cool podcast that I seen where they're doing that. So using event-based CI/CD with cloud events. For the folks that haven't checked out cloud events, CD events, that's a real fascinating space to be in at the moment as well. So that's looking at a new way of how we can connect our tooling as well. So traditionally we would write integrations on both ends of a tool. Now we're just simply sending a cloud event into this tool as well. So a lot of fascinating stuff coming out in observability. Now, yeah, all open source, but you still need someone to implement it as well. And like you said, like you need, if you're a startup and you can't really afford a DevOps, then maybe you would just go for a tool. That's probably expensive as well, but you just have to balance out what you think is the right way to do it. Yeah, so I think we can see the pattern that cost is quite a problem here as well, especially in IT at the moment because there's such a shortage of workers. So if you have, let's say in the US where they have big salaries for Kubernetes, let's say if you're almost paying $250,000 for one Kubernetes engineer, that's $1 million for 4 people. So that's a lot of money. So yeah, for observability, I mean, yeah, there's so many great tools that you can just plug and play these days as well. You can use tools like Argo, or Flux, or yeah. We're seeing it's a really fascinating project, the Autodesk GitOps project, because we're lucky enough to sort of play around with that. So if anyone wants to contribute, you can see on the banner there. Please reach out. Like I think working with Ortelius as well, it's probably one of my favorite communities and projects because everyone's so friendly. Like you have Tracy, Steve, yourself, and it's a good opportunity to like just jump in and do what you want, and you can. When I've been to other projects, I find it really hard to, you say, can I please have a good first issue, but there's so many like enterprise people like Red Hat, IBM, Oracle, Microsoft, and you can't really get into that project and have a passion for making something big. So I do recommend starting off, with Ortelius. Come say hello, learn some stuff, and we can show you all the folks these things as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's a wonderful, we have a very diverse community, like peoples from Pakistan, India, Australia, New Zealand, Philippines. It's a very diverse community. And also one of the best thing, like the core points of the Otilis community is to help other. It's to help other to navigate their career in the different direction where they want it to be. And raising an issue, talking to the people is really a simple task. It's not, you can talk to me on the Discord server, or the Brad, or anybody. We love to chat about with you as well. And also, we are really heavily investing with the microservices based deployment model, microservices based dashboard, the catalog, and we use some of the good open source tooling ourselves as well, like the Captain project, the Argo CD. We know these are the projects has a very good benefit, and we use those benefit as a Ortelius community. And that's a good thing. Like if you have the Captain experience and you have the Argo CD experience or the GitHub experience, we want to have use your existing knowledge, and we can contribute together in a very good way, because the microservices is today have so many complexity, and we need to figure out how to overcome some of those complexity with those awesome tools that we have available at this moment of time. And also, before we wrapping up the discussion, is like what is right now if people are interested to contributing to the open source project, especially on the Ortelius side, tell us about what is you currently busy at doing some of the work, because you're really doing some of the of previous, you have done wonderful project over the last few years, the Ortelius side. You integrate Captain project, the Argo CD, and other tools, other open source tooling. And tell us people who are really have their experience with their own open source tooling, and they want to integrate their open source tooling with our Ortelius open source project. So what are the way they can contribute? What are the way they can hook their integration with our open source tooling?
Yeah, so we have a Discord channel with a GitOps channel that you can come and say hello. And I mean, there'll be a lot of different use cases for folks that want to adopt what we have. It's almost finished. It's probably, I would say, 80% done. We're getting on to the service mesh side of it now as well. So that's very, very interesting. This project's very interesting because we get to play around with all those cool things. So we're starting to look at Argo rollouts and different deployment strategies. So, as you know, Argo CD will just pick up the Helm chart and deploy it, but we're starting to look at, well, okay, well, what if we want to do like blue green? What if we, um, you know, controlling the traffic? And it's starting to get really fascinating with that side of the fence as well, because to understand what way to go, you need to learn both as well. So we're playing with Argo rollouts, we're playing with Linkerd. Um, so it's at a very fun point, and we normally have meetings Australian time in the morning, which is not really suitable for. It only works for the US and Australia, but I think what we'll do is we'll have it like Pakistan India time just to mix it up, and then we can get some other folks involved more. There's some good talent from there at the moment as well. So um, I think we'll start changing the meeting. So look out for that. Maybe you and I can work on a time where we can see when everyone's ready, and let's have them at a better time zone, and we can get other people involved as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that the timing zone is difficultly a challenge, but we have a
Yeah.
solution available. Like you are managing the hoteliers Australian architecture meeting and these kind of stuff, and other
Mm.
people or folks have joined on the time that suits for them. So we have a very both ways are coming up. And if somebody listening to us is closer to the Brad or the Australian geography, they can connect with the Brad and Dean. They can get you on the board on the hotelier side of things. So that's the way we are looking at these projects. But also there are the mentioning of the hoteliers.io is our website, and you can go to the github.com/hoteliers/hoteliers and start looking at the project, and you look at the way you can contribute to this or repository as well, because we have a very good,
Mm.
we have a large system. Like we could talked about hoteliers like Orgo CD, Linkerd, and we talk about so many things. I think you can find a way to contribute some of those projects in. And I think you definitely try some of the our example repository there. And I think the Utkarsh is, if you go to the hoteliers.io, and one of the our contributor is Utkarsh. He has a wonderful guide how you can raise your first GitHub issue on the hotelier side. And we have also other podcasts available if you're really uncomfortable in what are the way you can contribute into it and why you
Mm.
contribute. We have other podcasts available on the beaminghoteliers.io. I think you definitely go there and check those out as well. And we have final few minutes available. So tell us about what's next for Brad, where what he's going to be working at, and I hope you go to the KubeCon as well. And if you go to the KubeCon, what interesting topic you want to hear about, and what your latest interest in the tech are.
Yeah, I think my latest interest is learning more about Backstage. So as you know, they're just coming to the incubator for CNCF as well. It's a project that has been on my list, but I haven't really checked it out yet. So really keen to explore more about what Backstage is, how I can use it, what talks do I want to see at KubeCon. Yeah, I haven't really decided yet. Normally I get two topics that I want to focus on, because I remember the first time I went to KubeCon, I was trying to learn everything and then I learned nothing. So um, for the two talks this year, I'll probably focus in on service mesh and probably a little bit more. Yeah, I don't know yet. I haven't quite decided. Um, there's so much stuff to focus in on as well. But yeah, I'll definitely be going this year. Hopefully, nothing too crazy in the world happens, and we can meet there as well.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Hope everything went well, and we will definitely finally meet at the KubeCon as well. And everybody who listening to a KubeCon is happening in May 16 to 20 at KubeCon Valencia, and also the CFB is open for the next KubeCon, and it's I think closing closes after the first KubeCon is ended. The next one is KubeCon NA is in Detroit, I'm like looking forward to
Mm.
submit the CFPs on that. And also, we am looking forward to have another guest on the next month podcast, and it's on GitOps. And everybody listening to us on the Beaming Ortelius podcast, if you want to chat about your experience of of running the GitOps infrastructure or GitOps enable infrastructure, feel free to hit me up on either on the Discord side in the Hoteliers community or either on the GitHub. We have both listening. Our Twitter handle is listening on the screen, so we're definitely looking forward to it. And if you are interested in contributing the Hoteliers projects, the link is available github.com/hoteliers, and we have more. We want to have more contributors that more different places in the world who can share their knowledge with us, and we want to learn each with each other as well. So thank you everyone who hang out for this session. Hope you have learned a lot during the conversation I had with Brad McCoy. And thank you very much, Brad, for spending time with me.
Thank
Every
you.
time I connect with you, learn so many good things from you. And I'm looking forward to finally meeting with the KubeCon as well. So thank you, everyone who joined us for
Sure.
today on the Tedious podcast. Hope to have you again in the future as well. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye bye. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you so much. See ya.